All right, good morning, everyone, to the local agency Traffic Safety Academy. My name is Anthony Schmott from Tyndall Oliver. A quick intro as always. You received your email with the notice. That's why everybody is here. Remember that that email has a link down about halfway down it. You have Dennis's email address, our coordinator. You'll hear from him in a second. Any questions and feedback, go to him. This is my email address. You know, if you have any issues with the website that I'm about to show you. But when you follow this hyperlink, it takes you to our Tampa Bay Traffic Safety Academy webpage where we have information about upcoming webinar topics. Dennis will talk about some changes that are coming to these webinars here, so be on the lookout for that. Additionally, on our website, there's a calendar of the upcoming ones, but we have the PDF PowerPoint presentations as well as actual recordings of the webinars that you can watch. They're all listed here by topic. And down at the bottom, we have our PDH request forms for the professional engineers that are seeking to get hours for these. The PDH form is available here on the website, and it is also available as a handout within the webinar application itself. If you have any questions during the webinar, type them into the question pod, and I believe we're going to be holding questions until the end. So, just kind of get those questions in there, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. With that, I will hand it over to Dennis for the official intro of the Academy.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony. This is Dennis Falloon. Good morning. And I just wanted to let you know that this is the fourth webinar of the District 7 Safety Academy cycle for 2017, and today's topic will be signal timing and phasing and the impact on safety. And it will be presented by Brandon Campbell, who is the PE, the Senior Project Manager for the City of Tampa, and he works in the Traffic Management Center. As Anthony mentioned, on some of this about the survey, we may have heard, but there's a survey that will be issued at the end of this, and we really would like to have your feedback on any future topics or your thoughts on the presentation. Also, there'll be a few poll questions today. So with that, I would like to go into my intro that I normally go through with everybody. And if you have any questions, you can ask that. But basically, the Academy is available to provide information on safety issues to enhance your local safety program. This is the 5th year of the District 7 Safety Academy. Began in January 2017, and it's scheduled to end around December 13, 2017. We have a window of 2 hours, 10 to 12. Normally they run between an hour and a half, and that's with Q&A. As Anthony mentioned before, to register, you go to this link, or if you need to go to the web page on the traffic safety information, you can go to that. And also, I have listed at the bottom of that target. And as I mentioned, this is signal timing and phasing impact on safety webinar today. And I wanted to mention a couple key points here. You can get AICP credit. You can go to the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety Com, and there's a link, and under that, there's some information how you can do it. Also, if you check the handout on your screen today, it's in there also if you want to print it out. Also, to check out the credits, you can go to www.planning.org. I also want to mention we ran into a little issue with AICP credits being posted out to the system. And just for all those planners, all of 2016 webinars are posted out there, and all of the current up-to-date 2017 webinars are posted out there for credits. So you need them, go out there and get them up, gather them up. PDHs for PEs, naturally we always have this, and you go to the website to get the form, but it's also listed in the handout, and it gives you instructions on how to submit that. If there's any questions or anything, you can contact me. But I also like to also briefly mention that we're going to be adding about 4 new webinars for this year. So that means there'll be a few months that will have more than one webinar in it. Just briefly, they are pedestrian intersection retrofit, lane departure initiative, Arrivalize FHP-based RSAs, and educational messages for pedestrians and bicycles. Those are not the final titles, but you will be getting a notice on these. And with that, I want to turn this over to Brandon Campbell for his presentation. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Excuse me, my name is Brandon Campbell, and I am with the City of Tampa, and I manage projects here out of our Traffic Management Center. I wanted to start off by getting a feel for who all I'm talking to. I see that there are 54 people that are on. Hang on here just a second. All right, so I have a couple of poll questions just to get an idea of what my audience is and what your background level is, what your experience level based on the topic at hand. And the first question I wanted to ask was what your affiliation is, whether you're local government, state, federal government, a private firm, academia, or other. So I'll give you just a minute to answer that poll question. Okay, and it looks like we are, we are at a 42% local, 40% local, 44% private, and then 15% state and federal. So the next thing I was kind of curious about was, where are you in terms of your professional experience timing signals? Have you ever timed a traffic signal? Are you just getting to know the ins and outs of it? Are you pretty well experienced with it, or would you consider yourself an expert? All right, kind of watching those come in. I see we've got about half are at the level of never having timed a traffic signal, and then the rest distributed among the other answers. So that gives me a pretty good idea of who I'm talking to and where your focus is. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and where my background is and how I came to the City of Tampa, and what my purpose is here for the city. I've been in the traffic engineering field for about 12 years, and until the beginning of this year, all of that experience is in Missouri. I worked for the Missouri Department of Transportation for 2 different districts as well as the central office. And in Missouri, things are a little bit different in terms of how things are arranged and how things are operated. The state actually owns, operates, and maintains about 2,000 traffic signals. So with my experience there, I started out even as an intern coordinating and timing traffic signals in small towns, and worked my way through different positions there. And in my last position at MoDOT, I was in our 3rd largest city, which is Springfield, Missouri, a town of about 250,000 residents. In that role, I was focused on ITS, on our traffic management center, signal operations, and managing projects that were related to those operations. Something interesting about that area of the state was that we had a 21 county district and about 10,000 centerline miles of state-owned roadways. So it was pretty significant in terms of the geography, but even within those 21 counties, we had several counties that didn't have any traffic signals at all, and the district itself had around 300 signals, and half of those were in the city of Springfield. So focused a lot of my time and efforts there within a small city type of environment. Came to the City of Tampa at the beginning of this year and brought that experience with direct operations experience as well as managing some projects there. to our traffic management center here in the city of Tampa to focus on managing projects that are related to ITS and signal project delivery. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of where I am coming from. My third and final poll question was, what statement describes your agency's signal timing philosophy? So it looks like since a lot of you are working for a government agency, that would apply directly to you. Those of you who are from the private sector, the question maybe is a little bit differently, would be interpreted a little bit differently. Do you have a clear idea of what the goals that your sponsor organization is looking toward whenever they're looking at signal timing in general? All right, so as those come in, I'm kind of watching. We're about at half of you saying we might have one, but I don't know it, or we don't have a clear or consistent philosophy. And I had a couple of reasons for asking this question. The first was that when I was in Missouri, I think I'd have to answer questions about signal timing philosophy differently based on the two different districts that I worked in. So as an agency, I'm not sure that we were entirely consistent. As different districts, we maybe were a little bit more consistent. And part of that was based on the first district that I was in was very rural, and the second district that I was in was mostly rural, but then had most of our signals in a more of a small city setting. The second reason that I asked this question is that from my perspective, what I've been able to gather over the last few months being here in the city of Tampa is that the philosophy of how we have timed signals as a city has shifted over the last few years. So what is that philosophy? I was asked to talk about, my boss really wanted to make sure that we covered our signal timing philosophy as a city. And something that I was really thinking about as I was putting that together is what exactly does that mean, and how does that play out in our day-to-day operation? And one of the effects of our signal timing philosophy is how we handle signal timing issues internally and how we treat our staff as we're going through signal timing efforts. But then the other thing is, what effect does our signal timing philosophy have on our end users? And I think it's a meaningful distinction, but it's one that we also should be making as professionals looking at traffic engineering issues with every single issue. How do we do that internally? How do we handle what our goals are for our staff? But what is that impact on the end user? And I won't talk about it too much today, but we're really starting to get into performance measurement in order to try to gauge what that end user impact is. So our signal timing philosophy is pretty simple. The first prong of that philosophy is that we empower our employees to take an active role. So we set pretty broad parameters for our operators to work within and let them make non-critical mistakes. It comes into play quite a bit during our active traffic monitoring and event management roles that we fill. And I'll talk some more about that in a little greater detail here in a minute. But something that I thought really summed up the way that we handle this recently was a conversation that I overheard one of our supervisors having the other day, and he was referencing one of our operators that is new to the city, and he said, I need him to fail, and I need him to fail fast. And it sums pretty well for me how we have been treating our employees, in that we want them to take ownership. We want them to be to be bold, to be able to experiment, and to really take ownership of the results of what they do. And part of it is that we just don't have a big enough staff to make sure that nobody's making mistakes and that they've got sort of over-the-shoulder support at all times. It also really kind of fits in step with what I've experienced in my career. As I mentioned before, even back as an intern, my first boss in Missouri was saying, go out and time some traffic signals. Here's the system, and go coordinate it. The second part of our philosophy here is that we need to protect our vulnerable roadway users. And in specific, I'm talking about bicyclists and pedestrians. They obviously need some accommodations that are specific to their needs. And it's the way that we treat bicyclists and pedestrians and try to protect them, I think, is one of those things that has shifted over the last few years here in the city of Tampa. And it really mirrors what I've seen really in my career looking at things in Missouri. I see really a combination of factors that drives the need to consider bikes and peds more closely. And one of those reasons is that as a percentage of overall traffic fatalities, pedestrian deaths have been climbing for more than a decade. I was just looking at that the other day. And while by a lot of substantive measures, our roadways have been getting safer, you look at the percentage of fatalities that are involving a bicyclist or pedestrian, and it just continues to climb. And here in Florida in particular, that's a big issue. Obviously, having warm weather year-round invites people to be outside and take a more active role in transportation and recreation all year round. And looking at, I keep hearing a radio commercial as I'm driving in. It says that a quarter of all traffic fatalities in Florida involve a bicyclist or pedestrian, and it really makes me stop and think about how significant that is and how we need to accommodate these users. I did see that later in the year in this webinar series, we have a topic specifically addressing pedestrian safety at intersections. So hopefully some of the things that I'll talk about mirror pretty nicely with that particular webinar, and you'll get maybe a little more in-depth analysis or a little more in-depth topic on that. The third part of our philosophy is that we move the main line during peaks and balance loads during all other times. There's still no denying that we are a car-centric city and a car-centric nation, and we're really trying to find the right balance. One of the case studies or aerial pictures that I'll show you here toward the end of the presentation kind of illustrates how our philosophy from the past has affected the infrastructure that's out there. And moving the main line during peaks has obviously been a long-standing goal of traffic engineers everywhere, but we're really trying to make a subtle shift, particularly during our off-peak times, on how we can best balance those loads. All right, so as a part of talking about our philosophy on signal timing, I really couldn't get away from just talking about what we do as a city, what's our structure, and how we orient ourselves around that philosophy and making sure that we're focused on the same end goal. Our setup here at the Traffic Management Center is that we have 3 different work groups that are integrated. The first is our operations group, which handles the operations and timing of the signals and working on ITS doing our monitoring. The second is the project management group, and this is the group that I lead. We handle the management of projects related to signals and ITS, and really that kind of fits in well with my background back in Missouri of being pretty focused on operations, but then coming in and focusing on delivering projects that fit with that philosophy, and also are good projects that we can operate and maintain. The third group that we've got here is the smallest, and it's our street lighting group. We've got street lighting co-located at the TMC, partly because of the obvious relationship to signals in terms of the type of work performed and personnel that would do that work. But also we see an opportunity there with the street lighting network and potential for integrating the street lighting network with a smart cities network, which is in its infancy here at the city of Tampa as it is elsewhere. So a little more in depth about what our traffic operations group does. Excuse me. So one of the primary functions of our operations group is to operate the reversible expressway lanes here in Tampa. If you're familiar with the layout of Tampa, the Selman Expressway goes all the way across town, but there is a set of elevated expressway lanes that goes from right outside our TMC in the downtown area out to Brandon, and it changes direction partly in the middle of the day, but then at the beginning and end of commute times, we've got inbound and outbound traffic. We reverse the operation of those lanes. And that setup has been arranged because the expressway is owned by the Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway Authority, or THIA. And our arrangement with them is that they own the building and a lot of the equipment here in our TMC and allow us to use this space in exchange for the labor and some of the equipment of that operation of the reversible express lanes. They still own and maintain it. We just do the operation. We also take a very active role in traffic management, and this is probably the most significant part of where our signal timing comes into play on a day-to-day basis. Our TMC operators play more than what I would call an observe and report or an observe and dispatch role, which is a pretty typical setup for TMCs around the country. But they're empowered to make those dial split offset changes as they see a need. And the result of that is that we've got a very specific skill set that we're looking for within that group. The operators and the signal timing group is integrated, and they're all within that umbrella of the traffic operations group. Those are managed by my counterpart here at the TMC. That staff does quite a bit of utilization of Twitter and Waze as well as they're doing their active traffic management. We have an agreement with Waze that sets us up basically as a super user, and so we will post closures and detours and those types of bits of information to Waze for users of Waze to make decisions. But we also use Twitter quite a bit. I think at last count I was looking, we've got about 200 followers on Twitter, which is not a huge following, but when you look at the composition of that group that's following us, it includes some prominent retweeters, news organizations around the Bay Area, and the secondary effect of their retweets is a fairly large impact on who's getting those messages that we send out. In all, we operate and maintain 555 traffic signals, and those are owned by a combination of City of Tampa, THIA, FDOT, and Hillsborough County. As part, really a subset of what that group does with our active traffic management is event management. So downtown Tampa, throughout the course of a year, will host about 900 different events. And if you're doing your math, that means that a lot of days have more than one event going on at any given time. And because those events will let out at different times, our operators have to be well equipped to make changes on the fly at times when either an inbound or outbound group of attendees to those events will be starting and having an impact on downtown traffic. We don't staff our TMC 24 hours a day, but we typically have people in the TMC from 5 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. and then based on the impact of what we expect of any given event, we'll staff it at other times as necessary. It's not really totally uncommon to have, two festivals, an off-Broadway production at the Straz Center and the Tampa Bay Lightning hockey game going on all at one time. So the way that we handle that is very small events that we don't expect to have a significant impact on their own. If they're going on at one, really on an isolated basis, we will not staff. But when we get up to multiple thousands or multiple events going on at the same time, we'll have anywhere from one person in the TMC staffing a Lightning game to all hands on deck types of events that really we've got people here at the TMC as well as people stationed in other areas of the city to help with those events. This January was one particularly big event after another. Every year we have our Gasparilla Day Parade, and this is the type of event that's an all hands on deck effort. We've got people at the TMC, we've got people at our Emergency Operations Center, we've got lots of boots on the ground ready to set up or take down our MOT that's been staged, and it's really a pretty big event. It was interesting for me to see as a new Tampa resident and someone new to Florida. I hadn't actually even heard of the Gasparilla Parade, but I was quickly told by various sources that it's either the second or third largest parade in the country, and I guess that depends on who's doing the counting. Another event that we had this January was the 2017 College Football National Championship game. You may have watched, you may have been in town for some of the events, but again, that was interesting. That was the week after I started at the city, and it was pretty well nonstop until everyone left town after the game. So that pretty well describes what our operations group does. I also wanted to talk about our projects and innovations that we've got coming up or in progress. These projects here or treatments are really more what I would consider our operational modifications. Most of these can be done by our in-house personnel, with the exception probably of curb extensions. But we've been pretty aggressively pursuing leading pedestrian intervals at various intersections around the city. We've got, I think, a list of 15 intersections that the operations group is working on implementing those leading pedestrian intervals. We have a couple of different places around the city where we either have already implemented two-stage pedestrian crossings or are looking at the potential for doing so. We've been looking at curb extensions in most of our intersections where we're doing ADA upgrades and there are adjacent on-street parking spaces. And then phasing treatments that we've been pretty aggressive with. Our flashing yellow arrows, our current approach to flashing yellow arrows is that any place that we've got a signal project that is touching signal heads, our default will be to go to a four-section signal head with a flashing yellow arrow, if it makes sense. I've got a couple of intersections where we just released a work order for them. They're really busy intersections and large intersections, turning left across three through oncoming through lanes. And the intent with that is to use that flashing yellow arrow permissive interval during the overnight hours when people are going to be impatient waiting for a protected only arrow to come up. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can on our left turn phasing. There are obviously still some situations where we're going to remain protected only left turns, but taken on a case-by-case basis, our mindset is that we want to start out with the idea of why couldn't this be a flashing yellow arrow. We also have right turn overlaps in various locations around the city where it makes sense. We're trying to be mindful of where we put those right turn overlaps and the effect that has on adjacent pedestrians. So I'm not sure that we've come down on a default for something like that, but we're trying to be mindful of where we do those, where it makes sense to move traffic, but also keeping in mind those vulnerable roadway users that I mentioned earlier. We've got several signal projects that are either going on or coming up. Typically in a year, we will completely replace around two signals from the ground up, including mast arms and cabinets and everything else. We also try to do 2 to 4 hardware refurbishments a year, which typically means replacing span wires, replacing signal heads, sometimes replacing cabinets, depending on what the age of the existing cabinet is. And then we're trying to identify funding to replace a lot of our city-owned signals. Those that are not on state or county-owned roads that are purely city-owned signals are really concentrated quite a bit in our downtown area, as well as the Ybor city area. And so we're looking at the potential for replacing 49 remaining signals that are in those two areas. This screenshot shows in the upper left, that's that's a typical signal in Ybor, and the bottom right is a typical signal in the downtown area. And you can see it's an old design. It's a modular signal. It was built by a company the company still exists, but I don't believe they do anything with traffic signals anymore. We have a lot of issues with rust on these, and the foundations are shallow. So we're looking at trying to get a number of them funded for the next fiscal year, and hopeful that if the Trump administration really gets through with a large infrastructure package, we might be able to find a way to consider a shovel-ready project with signal replacements here in the city of Tampa. So I also wanted to talk a little about some of the innovations that we are either in the process of putting out there or are incorporating in some of those other changes. With our communication network, we've finished one phase of our ATMS program and have another phase coming up with FDOT in 2020. In the meantime, right now, we actually have two different signal softwares. One of them is MTCS, and if you are familiar with the MTCS, it's a legacy program that is basically a DOS-based program that was put together by a company that hasn't existed for a number of years. And we have some pretty critical intersections still on that. It's a copper-based communication system that goes to those signals. So we've had a lot of trouble with that lately, and the worst part about that trouble is that it affects our downtown area, and some of our recent events that we've had staffed have had some struggles with getting inbound and outbound patterns pushed out to the system based on our server for MTCS having issues. So in the meantime, between now and that 2020 ATMS Phase 2 project, we have some short-term comm projects where we're trying to identify those most critical intersections and either put cell-based or radio-based communication and try to get those back into our new program, which is Syntrax. We're a Syntrax-based ATMS software. As part of those upgrades of the signals and getting those into Syntrax, we're using advanced traffic controllers, we're using Cobalt controllers, and looking to implementing advanced performance measures using high resolution data. And that gets kind of back to what I was talking about earlier with really trying to keep the end user perspective in mind. A couple of technology-related projects that are going on here in Tampa that we have some involvement with, but may not be the lead agency on, are the connected and automated vehicle projects going on. THEA, Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, has got a connected vehicle project. It's outfitting between 30 and 40 signals in the downtown area with roadside units for vehicle to infrastructure communication, and that's an exciting thing. We're pretty heavily involved with it because we'll be the maintaining entity as this all gets implemented. I'm not sure exactly on time frame for when that will be completed, but it's in progress now. The Hart Transit Agency is also working on an automated bus line project, which should be going downtown. That we haven't had a whole lot of involvement here at the TMC as a city with that particular project, but based on their routes going through city streets, that's something that I anticipate having a lot more involvement as we go along. We also have a smart paint project that we're trying to get off the ground. It's kind of an interesting setup where there are sensors. It's a special paint, and there are sensors in canes, specific types of canes that people with visual impairments use, and it will give them a notification of when they are on or exiting the crosswalk. So that's really in its infancy, and I'll be interested to see how that ends up playing out. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was a couple of case studies where we've either had opportunities to try to refocus on that philosophy that I've talked about, or we've had successes and opportunities both. The first one that I wanted to show you is at the intersection of Beta Bay Boulevard and Bayshore Boulevard. So on your screen, the north-south road is Bayshore. And if you look real close, north of that, the northbound direction has 3 lanes, and you can see some pavement markings that say merge. Excuse me. And if you look at the lane line between the inner lane and the middle lane, you'll see the shadows of some flexible delineators there. And the way this intersection is set up, we've got northbound through vehicles that can go at the same time as what would otherwise be a conflicting left turn. And it's nice for moving traffic, particularly in the AM peak as people are trying to get into the city. However, what we've seen here with this phasing setup is that as a pedestrian crossing that south leg to get to Bayshore, it looks like the southbound traffic is stopped, the eastbound lefts are going, and it would seem like you should be able to cross. And what we've seen is we've got a lot, this is a very highly trafficked pedestrian area, and they all want to be on the waterfront, understandably so. So we've got a lot of people that cross here, and what we've seen lately is that we've had a lot of pedestrian, a high number of pedestrian conflicts with those northbound throughs. I'm not sure whether that is more due to confusion or more due to people taking risks. But the way that this intersection is set up leads me to believe that there's a possibility of both. What we've got going on that's coming up here is Bay to Bay, the east-west road here, is being considered for a road diet, and it should open up an opportunity at the intersection itself to turn that into a dual left, which in turn will preclude us from having this type of setup where the lefts and the throughs can go simultaneously. And so we're looking at that as an opportunity to not only enhance the efficiency of the vehicle movements at the intersection, but to take a deeper look at pedestrian safety and how we can best accommodate such a heavy pedestrian movement. Second place I wanted to go, I mentioned this earlier, this is Bruce B. Downs and Cross Creek. And you can see that I've highlighted the longest of the 4 pedestrian crossings. And it's 152 feet or so. If you're doing a little bit of quick math, typically we time traffic signals, we time the pedestrian interval at 3.5 feet per second, which would mean this is a 30-second clearance time for the pedestrians going across. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was that with our approach to move the mainline traffic as much as we can, we run into issues with intersections like this. There's sort of a quandary of, do you just have really long cycle lengths? Do you just pretend like the pedestrians aren't going to affect coordination and just go ahead and time them for what they need to be and let them knock the signal out of coordination if one happens to show up? Personally, I would not want to be pushing my kids in a stroller across this. So as a pedestrian, it seems like a pretty hostile environment. And a little bit of background on this area of town. This is New Tampa. And Bruce B. Downs, which is a north-south street, is really the only way in and only way out of this area that is pretty densely developed with both residential and commercial development. In the mornings, we run about a 4-minute cycle, which is not surprising given the volumes and the lanes, the number of lanes out there, just how much is going through. But we have a consultant on board right now who's looking at the timing of both the Bruce B. Downs and the Cross Creek corridors. And one of the things that I expect from that effort is that at least in our off-peak times, we may be able to reduce those cycle lengths and get back around to those pedestrians. And I would hope that in the future, if we're looking at a corridor that's this big, we would take a little closer look at pedestrian refuge islands and seeing how best to accommodate those users. The third place that I wanted to take you is to our Cass Street cycle track. This is unique to this corridor in our city. This is the only place in the city of Tampa where we have a separated cycle track. Cass Street is an east-west street. We are facing west right now. It's on the north side of downtown Tampa. And you can't see it real well in this picture, but most of the cycle track that's there on the left side of the page is separated by a raised island or an island and parallel parking along Cass. And the way this is set up right now, if you look, it's kind of hard to see, but for people crossing that south leg by the red car there, you can see that there's a lighted pedestrian walk interval, and then to the right of that is a red bicycle signal, and then up overhead is a green vehicle signal. And we set it up this way knowing that different users have different needs, and so it was a reasonable starting point for us for the setup. However, we've had some operational challenges with it. We've got right now detectors out there specifically for the bicycles, and we've had just some issues trying to get those working well. And we've also had some confusion from users. I had a guy that contacted me that said, if I'm on a bike here and I pull up to a red signal just like this, I could legally get off of my bicycle and walk it across the crosswalk and not have to stop. So why am I having to stop as a bicycle in this situation? And it made a lot of sense to me, and thankfully I could tell him that we already had some changes in progress. But what we're looking at doing here is just phasing that bicycle signal the same as the vehicle signal. Right now we've got blank out signs, so I don't think I mentioned that those when the bicycle signals are green, we restrict turning movements for the vehicles. We'll be replacing those with just static yield to bikes and peds for vehicles. This setup with the separated cycle track is going to be mirrored in upcoming projects, including along Jackson Street, which goes through the middle of downtown. It's also an east-west corridor. All right, the last one that I wanted to talk about that is really addressing pedestrian needs at an intersection is at Twiggs and Meridian. If you look at the picture, the north leg of this intersection leads directly to the reversible expressway lanes. The building on the top right is where our TMC is, where I'm sitting right now. So I walk across this pretty regularly, going to meetings in our municipal office building downtown or to other destinations downtown. And it's been interesting for me to see this unfold. This intersection is owned by THEA, so the project is totally theirs. But you can see the south leg is a 105-foot crossing, and it can be a little bit intimidating. So what THEA is doing is they're adding a pedestrian refuge island. And right now it's just the island, but it presents a pretty good opportunity for us as we move along to put heads and push buttons out there for pedestrians as well. Because that north leg is the expressway lanes, there are times of day when there's no southbound traffic at all. And so the phasing is pretty complicated. We've got also railroad preemption there, and adding a little bit of flexibility for how we time the pedestrians should just help us out in several ways, including just making it work more efficiently for cars. But it's really nice to be able to be out there now and just worry about crossing one leg and not have to worry about left-turning vehicles cutting things a little close. This is a picture from last week. They're completely done with the island construction now, and it's a positive improvement for us. So with that, I don't know if there were any questions, but I'd be happy to entertain some now. Or my contact information is there. If anything comes up, any questions or comments or suggestions, I would be happy to take those.
Let me pull up the question pod here. Back when you were doing the poll questions, there was a comment of an individual saying that their philosophy is changing with increased awareness of the range of users. So it was kind of a D, none of the above. Here's our write-in response, just to kind of indicate that it is good that things are changing as agencies become aware of their users and those philosophies are adjusting. I know that you alluded to some of the changes.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean that's.
Yeah, I would add to that there are a lot of reasons that is changing, and I don't think if you're seeing that in your agency, I would say you're not unique. I have witnessed maybe closer to the end result of that change here, but then also witnessed the view changing back in Missouri. I would say we went from viewing pedestrians and bicyclists as impediments to moving the real traffic to viewing them as a subset of users that we need to accommodate.
Yeah, that's probably something that's happening throughout everywhere, and that's definitely a good change to see. On that note, with regards to differences between Missouri and Florida, not to kind of throw anybody into the bus or compare things, but like what are some different challenges that you're facing here in Florida that you didn't foresee, or things that are just I'm kind of curious based on I love speaking to people that are from out of town because they have a slightly different perspective.
Sure, I would say the nature of my work here is surprisingly similar to what I was doing in Missouri. We're really kind of all facing the same types of challenges, and for me, being here at the city is maybe more an issue of scale. Where I was before was a smaller city, so there's just a lot going on here. I would say the one challenge that's not necessarily an operational challenge as much is that the infrastructure just ages more quickly here. So a lot of things are in need of replacement that if they'd been installed at the same time where I was before, they may have a little bit more life left.
So the salt in the air or something.
Yeah.
There's a question about mid-block crossings for pedestrians. The question is, what are you working on for mid-block crossing pedestrians? Are you going to signalize them or let them keep fending for themselves?
Those tend to be handled more by our downtown transportation group. So my focus project management-wise is more on signal and ITS types of projects. But I will say that with our downtown project management group, that they are interested in rectangular rapid flash beacons. We have a couple of Hawk beacons as well in the city. I think maybe exclusively on state-owned roadways. So those projects would have been built really as a partnership, I guess I would say, between the city and the state. But yeah, I think I don't know how aggressively they're pursuing our RFBs, but I do know that they are an option that they seriously consider whenever they're looking at mid-block crossing locations.
Yeah, I mean that's a challenge. I know that from our standpoint, we do a lot of safety studies for DOT, and we've done a dozen traffic engineering manual 3.8, reviews for mid-block crossings all over the place recently. We've denied a few, we've approved a couple others, and I mean they're proactive. They listen to people when they have complaints, and there's guidelines that we need to follow for installing things, and it's a balancing act between the vehicles that are going by and the pedestrians and how far away the facilities are, and coordinating with the transit agencies about the bus stop locations, and it's a real challenge. And to kind of address the "are you going to keep letting them fend for themselves" kind of comment there, it's drive down Fletcher Avenue, and that's like an award-winning design where all the mid-block RFVs were installed, and it's really good, and the state and the city did a good job to try to get all that together and coordinate. And I mean, it's a great project, but pedestrians cross where they will. I mean, you provide facilities, and we're in the process of doing before and after studies for that to evaluate the crashes. And there's some concerns that maybe the number of crashes haven't gone down as much as we would have liked. Anecdotally, when you drive the corridor, you see pedestrians still crossing anywhere they want to, the 20 feet away from where a new RFP was provided for them. So, if you signalize a location, pedestrians may or may not use it. So it's a challenge determining the exact location for it. And in addition to that, when you provide, complete streets, you make the facilities nicer, you increase exposure. And when you increase exposure, crashes go up. So, that's a challenge also when evaluating the locations, is that you make it nicer for pedestrians, but your numbers of crashes actually go up because you've made it so much nicer. If your bicycle and pedestrian usage doubles and you have one or two extra pedestrian crashes, is it more safe or is it more dangerous? It's, if you normalize against the usage, it's a tough one. I don't know that anybody has a blanket policy of, we're going out there and putting a mid-block crossing between every one of our signals. I mean, that's not what any of the agencies are doing, but on a case-by-case basis, they're doing engineering studies and evaluating those locations. So if you have a particular spot that you'd like to be studied, I mean, contact your safety engineer, if it's in the city or the county or the DOT, and, we'll definitely work with you to evaluate that location. There's a question about Vision Zero. How has Tampa's adoption of Vision Zero affected the traffic signal policy?
I'm going to have a hard time answering that question, having only been here for about 3 months. I don't know. I'm not really sure exactly how to answer it. Okay.
The Bayshore, there's Rudy, you asked a question about the road safety audit. I think the road safety audit that I did along Bayshore was north of that. I think there was a more recent one, and I'm not sure if it was along that location. I don't know, Brandon, if you know if a road safety audit was done at the location that you were talking about, where you had the kind of the continuous northbound through movement that was conflicting with the pedestrians. If a safety study was there or not.
I don't know if they did a full-blown road safety audit. I do know that the intersection was addressed as part of a road diet study for Beta Bay.
Okay. Yeah, because I know some time ago, I mean, my firm did an RSA, and there was another firm that did a safety study for the corridor. They recommended some mid-block crossings and a few other things. So, I mean, Bayshore is a corridor that's being looked at by multiple people because it is kind of high profile, high volume. That's a location that we want to improve. Yeah. There's a request to talk more about APS.
So our APS approach is pretty ad hoc, I would say. We have a few locations where it's been requested and we have put it in. Maybe only one location even. That's where I was in Missouri. I actually had an opportunity to be a part of a team that was looking at the policy of the state doing APS and where we should go with it. And we were really on the verge of saying, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in terms of the way the Department of Justice interprets this. So we should just go ahead and try to implement a plan of retrofitting. And we're not there now for the city. And so I think probably what we would wait for on that is what lead is FDOT going to take on that? What's the position? Because I think at some point we're all going to be there where we're doing APS everywhere. Trying to keep it in mind.
For the audience, for the audience, if you want to define, I mean, we're talking about accessible pedestrian signals.
Yes.
Not everyone
So,
about APS.
right. Right. So APS, accessible pedestrian signals, being signals that are audible, vibrotactile, have some very specific features that make it an APS type pedestrian push button. And the idea with them for the Department of Justice is that if you are giving a visual signal to people who are able to interpret that, the audible signal is the message equivalent to those who have a visual impairment.
Question about your office. How many people in your TMC? What is the staff?
I think we're at a dozen now. Let me think. Let's see. I've got 4 in my project management group. Right now, the lighting group is just 1 engineer. The operators group is 6, I think, 6 or 7. So we're at about a dozen.
And how long has the city been maintaining its own signals? Do you know how many staff in their traffic ops section?
How long have we? I think since, as far as I know, we've been maintaining our signals since they've been installed. Was that the question?
Yes.
So we've got several. I'm sorry. So we've got several that are owned by the city. I don't know when the agreements to maintain FDOT signals or county signals were first put in place, but it's been we maintain all of the signals that are within the city limits, regardless of the ownership.
There's some interest in the smart paint that you mentioned.
Yes.
Who can they contact to find out more about that? That's kind of an interesting concept. Do you have any?
Send me an email, and I'll try to get you the details that you are after. My boss has been a little more involved with that. Vic B-Day is my boss, and I know that he's been a little bit more involved with it, pursuing it. But we'll definitely get you some information.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So, I mean, Brandon's email is up on the screen right now. So if you guys shoot him an email if you're interested in finding out more about smart paint, and he'll send info back to you. Leading pedestrian intervals. Do you guys have a use and policy? How do you justify them? Do you have any that you're aware of?
I don't know that we have a formal policy that we've put out there right now. It's more of an experimental phase. I believe that we've put it out at 3 or 4 locations, and we've got a list of 15 that we're looking at. And since that's as much an operational issue, it's more an operational issue than a project management issue. That's something that my counterpart here at the TMC has handled. But again, that's another one. If you want to email me, I can get with him when he gets back in the office and see what his criteria are for determining where to put it and really how long the interval even is. I think it's 3 or 4 seconds.
With regards to the APS, are you involving mobility specialists when there's a request, or you just send your engineering staff? Kind of how are those handled? Frankly,
I don't think we've gotten very many requests. So I was told that we've got at least 1 out there, but I think that if we were asked to put it in at any given location, we would go ahead and do it if we were able to. If we needed to pull new cable or something like that, and we ran into a significant issue with just the logistics of installing it, we might have to take another look at it. But I don't know that we've gotten a whole lot of requests. I don't think it's been extensive enough that we have had a need to involve any outside expertise.
And then another question or comment over at the Bayshore kind of continuous green through lane. FDOT District 2 did an evaluation of all their locations with that geometric configuration, as well as a TRB paper. I guess we can look up and find out what improvements they're doing. But are you guys doing, kind of in light of identifying that location, are you proactively looking at other locations? Do you have any other intersections that have a similar configuration that you're looking at improving, or is this for now a one-off?
I know we've got one other signal on Bayshore that has that same configuration. And honestly, at Beta Bay, I think we're still pretty early in it, so we'll see where it goes. I know that they have had an issue where when they've gone to the public with a change out there before, that they got a lot of opposition. And I don't think we would do a change in terms of making that the dual left and stopping the northbound throughs without going out to the public and doing some public involvement campaign. So that might dictate how we handle that going forward, but we'll see how that plays out before we decide whether or not to extend that to the adjacent intersection with the same setup. As far as I know, those are the only two, though.
Yeah, I guess, but depending on how successful those are, because that's something that we always like to do, like a unique situation appears, we identify a particular crash pattern or geometric configuration, and then, kind of a bottom-up, top-down approach to safety is then begs the question then, is there anywhere else in our jurisdiction that has that same problem? And then you proactively identify other locations and apply the same countermeasure at those locations. I mean, that's something that agencies always do that. It's, it's a matter of having the time, having the man hours, having the funding. You balance a lot of things.
Sure, and I've seen some success as well with involving the public. If you're taking a system-wide approach, if you say, hey, we're not just looking at your particular location and applying a fix to it. This is how this fits in a broader context, and I think that sometimes goes a long way toward getting that buy-in.
Great. That's the last question that I have in the chat. I don't know if we have any of our, district safety staff or anybody that's, the guys that usually chime in. If anybody wants to be unmuted, I can let one of you guys chime in. But this was a good presentation. We had a pretty lively Q&A too. That's nice. We had in the end we had 60 people, but we had about 20 that came and went. So we had about 80 folks on the line at any given moment. So that was a good group.
Brandon,
good, thank you.
Saloon, I want to tell you that was a very good presentation and appreciated it. And I want to tell all the attendees to keep an eye on your monthly notice, because we will be adding a few more topics before the year is out. So just keep an eye on it. Any other questions there, Anthony? Or?
No, there's no other question. There's no other questions in the chat that are coming in right now. So we'll go ahead and end the recording, but we'll stay on the line for a few minutes if anything else trickles in. Thanks everyone for attending. Look for that questionnaire that comes at the end of the webinars that GoToMeeting sends you. Again, we're always looking for new topics, anything that you may find interesting that we have not covered, changes that have happened to some of our manuals and standards that you want covered, or if there has been any topic that we've covered in an overview that you would like further information on. We've been thinking about the idea of having, in addition to these monthly webinar topics that change every month, having a webinar series that's kind of interlaced in between, where we pick one topic and speak about it at length over the course of a couple of months, where we have intermediate topics as well. So, let me know what you think about that idea. We've also toyed around with the idea of having panel discussions on a particular topic, where rather than having one speaker with a prepared presentation, we maybe have 3 or 4 speakers that have a short thing to talk about, and then we have a Q&A. So we're always looking for ways to improve the Academy. So in the comments, if you guys can provide us with that information, that would be great. With that, I guess. Oh, go ahead, Dennis.
I was just going to say it would be well appreciated. Can you look at the attendees? Is that a raised hand on Christine? Does she want to speak?
I'm sorry?
Can you look? Never mind. Never mind.
Okay, well, we'll stay on the line, but I'll end the recording here. Thanks everyone for attending.